The biggest things I can say is differentiate yourself and be obsessive about it, you know, like tell yourself in the mirror, or be able to tell anyone in 30 seconds or less why you're different, why what's out there isn't as good, and why the customer needs it. Like, what is the benefit to the customer?
I had always wanted to be a lawyer, and I basically failed the LSAT. I'm a terrible test taker, and that was a devastating moment for me, but what I quickly realized was that failure is nothing more than life's way of nudging you and letting you know you're a little bit off course. And Spanx would not exist if I had not failed, or basically failed the LSAT. I also was raised by my parents. My dad had this thing that he did when we were little, and it made me realize that I'm really not afraid to fail at all. My biggest fear would be to not try something. And my dad, when we were young, my brother and me, we'd sit at the dining room table at night, and he would say, "What did you guys fail at this week?" And if we didn't have something, he'd be basically disappointed. And it was complete reverse psychology, but it was brilliant because it caused my brother and me to try out for things we didn't think we'd be good at, and it made us less fearful to go outside of our comfort zone.
I visualized this for myself. When I was selling copiers door to door, I had a very clear vision of what my life was going to be like. And I encourage everyone to do it. Take a snap photo of what success looks like for you. How many employees do you have? How much are you making? Where do you live? Are you sitting at a table with world leaders? Are you standing on a stage in New York City giving a speech? And hold on to that snapshot, and you will subconsciously start to make decisions that get you there. And so my snap photo for myself when I was going door to door to sell copiers was to be self-employed, invent a product that I could sell to lots of people and not just one copier to each person, and create a business for myself that would continue to fund itself if I wasn't present. I wanted money to be generated without me having to be there. I was that specific in my vision.
Customers want to be talked to and not talked at, and I think a lot of companies talk at a customer, and it's very sort of glossy speak, and it doesn't seem real. And from day one, I never tried to hide that I was the girl in my apartment with the red backpack. It's like, this is who I am, and I find that people end up rooting for you and opening more doors if you're really honest early on. Some people start businesses and try to come across that they're much bigger than they are because they feel like that's the only way they're going to be taken seriously. But if you know your product's great and you know why you made it, you don't have to apologize for being out of your home or your apartment or being small.
I like to say that the big secret behind disruption is not having any idea how it's supposed to be done. I had no idea how it was supposed to be done. And if you have no idea how something's supposed to be done, I guarantee you will end up being disruptive. But the key is you have to let it, you have to embrace not knowing. A lot of times when we don't know something, especially, most people in society, we end up being afraid of what we don't know, or we take that as a negative. It can hold us back. Whereas if you let what you don't know become your greatest asset, you are bound to do things very differently. Because we're all mostly on autopilot in life, and if you think about it, we're doing things exactly the way somebody else showed us how to do it. Everything that we're doing is because someone else showed us how to do it. So I like to do this mental exercise, and I tell people at Spanx to do it too. I say, close your eyes and pretend like you have no idea how to do your job. Just sit in that space for a minute. What comes up? If no one has shown you how to do your job, how would you be doing it? And listening to the answers. But it takes asking those questions, asking why, and spending that time in that space to say, is there a better way? Why has a bra always been made this way? Or why is it this way? And so for me, my not knowing was really a great asset for me.
You write your goals down, it makes all the difference. Harvard did a study in 1973. They took the graduating class and asked how many of them had goals. 100% of them had goals. Well, they asked how many had written down their goals upon graduation. only 5% of the class had. In 1993, 20 years later, they followed up with the class. They found that the 5% that had written down their goals 20 years prior upon graduating were worth more financially than the other 95% of the class put together. So I have always written my goals down about what I wanted to achieve, and I really attribute a lot to that.
As soon as you can afford to hire your weaknesses or the things you don't enjoy as much, do it. And any time that you can delegate and clone yourself kind of and try to get some additional support, it's a great moment in a small business. You know, I hired my day-to-day CEO about 2 years into starting Spanx, and up until that point, you know, when you have no money, you're every department. So I got to learn very quickly what I'm really better at, what I'm not as good at, what I enjoy doing, what I don't enjoy doing, and I couldn't wait to hire someone to fill in my weaknesses and just focus on my strength.
Spanx is in all the top retail stores. I meet people all the time that say, how in the world did you get into Neiman's and Saks? And I say, I called them. And they just look at me. They said, well, didn't you go to trade shows? I've been going to trade shows for 7 years, hoping that a Neiman's buyer walks by. I didn't know enough to do that, and it ended up being a blessing. So I always encourage people to think outside of the box. The way it's always been done isn't necessarily the way it should be done, and oftentimes what's inside of you is a better way of going about it.
Growing up, my father used to ask my brother and me what we had failed at the dinner table, which was so interesting, and he'd celebrate it, and he'd actually be disappointed if I didn't have something that I failed at that week. So I can remember saying, Dad, I tried out for this and I was horrible, and he would actually high-five me and say, congratulations, way to go. And what it did was just reframe my definition of failure. Failure for me became not trying versus the outcome. So many people don't take risks for fear of failure. They don't start the business, they don't go create the art they want to create, or they don't go try out to be in the play, or whatever it is, for the fear of failure. And once you redefine that for yourself and realize the failure is just not trying, then life opens up to you in many ways. And I would also, my dad would encourage me anytime something didn't go the way I expected it to, or maybe I got embarrassed by a situation, to write down where the hidden gifts were and what I got out of it. And I started realizing in everything there was some amazing nugget that I wouldn't have wanted to pass up.
You famously started Spanx with $5,000 in your bank account. What was the hardest part about getting Spanx off the ground?
The hardest part about getting Spanx off the ground was definitely in the very beginning, when you first have an idea as an inventor and you've thought of something that doesn't exist and you want to bring it into the world. There were two things that were happening. One was my own self-doubt was a really hard part of the journey, and then the beginning of all the manufacturers that I was having to cold call and talk to try to get my product made were all men, and it was much harder to explain and to try to get them to understand the concept of what the product was. So I heard the word no for 2 straight years trying to get it made, which then increases the self-doubt that can happen. And one of the interesting things about being an inventor is you don't go to school for it. There isn't an inventor class. You can't major in inventing. And so it's really a belief system in yourself and the willingness to look stupid or to have people laugh at you or to fail at something that you believe in. You're your own gut check on that. And so it takes a lot of confidence. So that was the hardest part of my journey. There was a lot of starting and stopping and like, am I crazy? And everyone's saying no. But I kept picking myself back up to pursue it.
Actually really manifested the idea. So, it's like everyone's always like, how did you take an idea and then start a business? Well, it's how did you even come up with the idea? I was in search of my idea. And at the time, my life was not great. I was selling fax machines door to door. I was living with my mom. I was like 25 years old. And I remember after a whole entire day of being kicked out of office complexes again all day, or sometimes my business card ripped up in my face, I pulled off the side of the road one day, Kathy, and I was like, I'm in the wrong movie. Like, what just happened? Call the director, call the producer. This is not my life, this is not my movie. And I went home that night and I wrote down my strengths, or what I thought I was good at. And the only thing in the good column really was sales.
And I thought, okay, well, I know I'm good at selling. What is it I like about selling? And I realized I like offering something to someone that they need or didn't know that they needed that can improve their life or help them. And so in that moment, I wrote down in my journal, I want to invent a product that I can sell to millions of people that will make them feel good. And and you know what? And 2 years later, the idea came to me, and I was ready for it. You know, women had been cutting the feet out of their pantyhose for a long time, and I only did it one time, but I had already asked the universe for my idea, and I said, when it comes, I will not squander it, and I will take it and run with it.
Spanx was profitable from the first month that I was in business, and I'm of the belief system for me in my journey to start small, think big, and scale fast. And a lot of people want to start big and think big, and oftentimes get ahead of themselves, and that can end wildly successfully, but it can also cause a lot of problems, and you dilute yourself down a lot, and then you have a lot of other people you're answering to. So that just was the journey that I took. I started it with $5,000. I've never had any outside funding, and whatever money I made from selling Spanx, I just put back into the business.
I love that. Start small, think big.